Hi, everybody. I'm George, and this is the Best Little Horror House in Philly, the show where we talk about the best horror movie ever made, according to our guest, at least. And it's a very exciting episode today, because today's guest is not just a great comedy writer, not just a 4-time champion on Jeopardy, but also a several-time excellent podcast guy with the former Cracked podcast, One Way to Make an Emoji, in which you detailed the process of submitting the bison emoji to Unicode. Very fascinating. Kurt Vonneguys, and of course, secretly incredibly fascinating, Alex Schmidt is here. Welcome, Alex.
George, that was very nice of you. Thank you. I want to get what was that? Several-time excellent podcast guy. I want to get that on a banner or one of those big soccer fan scarves, with the words on it. I love it.
Hell yeah. Well, it's the truth, and you deserve that scarf. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your relationship with horror?
I'm very glad to be here. And my only trepidation about doing it was that I am scared of a lot of horror movies. I have it's sort of like how picky kids have specific foods that they will or won't eat for their own weird internal logic. And I'm good at zombie movies. I'm good at anything with a sci-fi element, which led to this movie, Sunshine. But anything very satanic or magical really, really freaks me out, and I do pretty poorly with. And I think that in particular makes me someone who is sort of outside of the mainstream of maybe most horror fans, just because I have my own and super super gross monsters can bug me. I feel like I sound like I'm 5, but you know what I mean. It's my own particular things, and this movie I especially like because it's one I can consume.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that a lot of people feel that way about having subgenres that just kind of squick them out or whatever.
Yeah.
So sci-fi is a favorite of yours in general, and then this just kind of happens to subvert that in a horror direction, and that's part of what you like about this?
Exactly. Yeah. I especially don't like the satanic stuff because I feel like all the characters are just screwed. If Satan is hunting you, great. Game over. Not great.
Yeah, what can you do?
There's nothing to talk about. And
right.
And I, for some reason, am much more able to watch something where there's constantly steps going on. There's constantly planning, coping, figuring it out going on. And this movie especially taps into that thing with NASA type space stories where there's always characters sitting down to be okay, if we put the thingy number 1 and the thingy number 2, admittedly everything depressurizes, but then we maybe survive. And I love those little cat and mouse with existing things for some reason. That really works for me.
Yeah, I think that part of what appeals to me about that kind of thing as well is just that there is so much of Mann having to fend against his environment as well as other people, because there's all the dynamics at play with all the other crew members, but space itself is so frightening and dangerous that if any single thing goes wrong, it could all be over for any of them, and they're at each other's throats, creating that possibility.
Yeah, space, we don't belong there at all. And so, this movie, even if they didn't do the premise of the sun's dying, there's just such humongous stakes leaving the Earth. It's already a story. Really great.
Absolutely. And like you said, the movie we're talking about today is Sunshine, the 2007 banger written by Alex Garland of Best Horror Movies Ever Made, Annihilation, and 28 Days Later fame, and featuring the 28 Days Later collaborators, director Danny Boyle and star Cillian Murphy. What a way to set yourself up for success with this crew, because that's just the start. Also among the cast, we've got Chris Evans, Michelle Yeoh, Rose Byrne, Hiroyuki Sanada, Benedict Wong, and Mark Strong. Incredible.
Yeah, I hadn't watched this in a long time, and then when I rewatched it for this, I was like, oh, half these people are in Marvel movies now. And and many of them are famouser, and I am a huge fan of the James Bond franchise, especially the Brosnan times, even though there's probably not a good reason for that. But Michelle Yeoh is a key person in that, and so this was a spaceship of friends. Especially today. People I'm excited to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the script began as a pitch from Garland to Boyle about the heat death of the universe and what having the fate of the world on one person's shoulders could do to their head, instigated by a scientific article projecting the future of humanity. And Danny Boyle loved this, and he said that he had always wanted to direct a sci-fi movie that was actually set in space, so he took it to 20th Century Fox.
I've never researched this movie, too. This is very exciting. Yeah.
Well, get strap in.
Yeah. and I've heard the show and know you research, so I was excited to find out. Yeah.
Well, I love to hear that. And they didn't want to touch it because they had just had a flop in the Solaris remake, and they felt that this hewed a little too closely to that story, which not totally sure where they're seeing a ton of similarities besides just it takes place in space. But it is what it is.
I mean, it's in space. It's a film. It's in space. I just want it to be like a checklist that repeats the same two things forever. And they're like,
yeah,
you could stop. They're like, no. In space, though. In space. You see?
Yeah. There was one check mark that said Clooney, but that got scratched off.
Right. He could restart the sun with that grin. Am I right?
Oh, my gosh. Perfect. That's the only brilliance we need, folks.
One star to another. Here we go. Clooney to the sun.
That's right. So 20th Century Fox was like, we're not going to distribute this under this banner, but we are interested in distributing it under Fox Searchlight. But even with that, Fox Searchlight was like, we're not going to actually fund it, just distribute it. Because the estimated budget of $40 million was too rich for their blood, so Boyle utilized UK tax breaks, lottery funds, and ingenious media to gather the money, and they got to work on pre-production.
Wait, what's Ingenious Media? Is that a company?
Yeah, they it's like a smaller film company, but it's like a third-party, not directly studio production company kind of thing.
That's one of those company names where it sounds like it's a term I haven't heard of or something. Like,
yeah.
And he employed his ingenious media. Like it's a magic card or something. Really cool.
Hey, it may well be as well.
Yeah.
Sounds like Blue Manna to me. So pre-production began, and they worked on the script for a year, taking 35 drafts to get it to where they were happy with it.
Wow.
Yes, certainly wow. And this entailed consulting plenty of actual scientists and futurists in particular, which I thought was interesting to include them as well. And this included Brian Cox, a University of Manchester particle physician.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Cool.
Another also famous Brian Cox, not the Manhunter though.
There's a show called The Infinite Monkey Cage that the physicist Brian Cox co-hosts. And so maybe it's that guy.
It is. I believe it is the one. And
he's great.
He was very charming. He does the commentary as well on the DVD.
Man, this is the one and only reason DVDs needed to stick around, or else streaming services need to offer these things. Man, oh man.
Hey, Criterion Channel is starting to do it, so hopefully other people start getting on the train. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, good. I want to hear Brian Cox's silky smart voice tell me everything about the film. This is great.
Yeah. Now, what I thought was interesting about this scripting process, especially considering they brought so many scientists and futurists in, is that Danny Boyle and company decided to allow for some of the inaccuracies that got pointed out to remain in the movie for the sake of entertainment and genre hallmark familiarity. And Cox himself said that he found it weird how many scientists were getting hung up on stuff like the slow-mo during zero gravity, the whooshing spaceship noises, and the sun to grab and be eaten away at by a cue ball, the theoretical blob of bosonic particles that would be stable against fission or evaporation. And so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on sort of the scientific accuracy and its place in a movie like this, where it's not necessarily trying to be a documentary, but is certainly kind of wrapping in some of the real science.
Wow. I think not knowing any of that, because I know very little physics of that kind and astrophysics, but I think it's just such a workable premise to say the sun's running out of gas. Yeah. And I know it's not gasoline, but that works so well that I was totally not bumping on fuzziness or cheating with any of the details. That's fine. Like it doesn't bug me at all.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Because I believe stars die, right? Like that's a thing that happens. And so it's just this sci-fi world where they figured out a bomb that can, restart it like jumper cables on a car. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I'm really not sweating anything else. I do know that thing of like spaceships don't make a whoosh sound. And I guess I just accepted that because that is like fakey, but also we're used to it from Star Wars. So
yeah, that's just what sci-fi looks like these days.
Yeah, you just want it to sound like a fun car or something, and so there's a whoosh sound. That's it.
For me, I do think it is interesting, and there is that element of Tarkovsky versus Kubrick that I always talk about with the comparison between 2001 and Solaris, the original version, where Tarkovsky feels that Kubrick is fetishizing technology and not really examining the source of conflict. And so to me, what avoiding those little technical details that don't actually add to the movie does is it's not fetishizing the technology. It's about what makes the story communicate itself in an effective way so that everybody can engage with it, not just every person who knows everything about physics and science.
Oh, cool. I like that a lot. Yeah. Ultimately, it's about what kind of dramatic structure and situation can you do. And the other thing with this movie is, like, when it gets to what I always think of as the horror part, when we can do spoilers, right? Pinbacker's running around stabbing everyone and stuff. Like, he's not realistic at all, right? Like, the camera can't focus on him when in real life it could, so many elements of him are so out there that I'm not sweating exactly how the sun's engine works. It's fine.
Yes.
It's not a big deal.
Exactly. Similarly to this science aspect, there were originally some romantic subplots that got nixed because Danny found them, quote, embarrassing to be worrying about these plot lines when the stakes were so high and everyone was going through such intense psychological and physical pressure. So I thought that was a funny comment from him.
Oh, and yeah, I mean, I want subplots plural. Maybe it's mainly just Roseburn being in love with Cillian Murphy, which we get a sense of. Yeah,
I think there's that, and then there was also something about in the it might have been like a triangle, because in the backstory for Mace, it says that he is like in love with Cassie. So
okay, that would actually kind of ground them fighting early on, but also you don't need it. It doesn't have to be a fight over a girl. It can be a fight over the mission or over just, we've been in this like incredibly high pressure death spaceship for a year and I'm freaking out,
Yeah.
Who among us hasn't had a coworker who rubs us the wrong way on our high pressure death spaceship after
So true. Oh man, I hate when that happens.
Yeah. That's written on a coffee mug somewhere, right? Of course.
So the crew did a few things to help prepare for the film at Boyle's behest, including living together during filming, participating in space and scuba training, touring nuclear submarines to get a sense of the cramped living conditions, and most importantly, reading the book Moondust by Andrew Smith. And this book is a collection of stories from the men who've walked on the moon, which notably discusses the lasting psychological changes that these astronauts faced by their shifting earthly perspective. Something that clearly plays a role in this movie as well.
Oh, that adds up. Yeah, there's a lot of overview effects, but in an extreme and different way all the time. Like that's almost the whole premise of the movie, even beyond the sun restarting and a guy stabbing everybody.
Yeah, exactly. This pre-production phase took another year, so they're up to 2 now, and then 3 months of filming. And then they had to take another full year to edit and complete the visual effects, which are numerous, 750 individual effects. Oh. But then on top of that, the usual way that special effects are done is they get broken out into several different effects farms. And this, because Danny Boyle wanted to have a little bit more control over the exact way that it looked and a little more consistency through the whole thing, they utilized just one studio to do all of the effects for the movie, which is why it took another year.
Oh, they focused on just this one team will do all of it.
Right.
Cool. And that's uncommon, I suppose. Like,
yeah,
they kind
definitely.
of farm pieces out to different people and they knock it out faster.
Right, yeah. Usually it's all about the speed that they can get it done and not necessarily about the creative consistency that follows the whole process, so.
Okay. Yeah, it does. I like that it's almost, I don't know if you ever did, like, theater. I did high school theater. I'm not trying to brag about a huge theatrical background, but it's that there's that high school theater thing of like you're all in a little unit for that whole time and really doing this project together. And it sounds like from the famous actors to the effects people, they really tried to like make it one team the whole way. That's cool.
Yeah, definitely. And Danny said that after this movie, he was done with science fiction movies for a few reasons. First, he said that this one helped him conquer his fear of the difficulties of the genre, specifically how much time it takes, how much effort you have to put into the special effects and everything. But more importantly, that he found it to be spiritually exhausting to constantly have to face the uncaring nature of the universe. And this was in fact the case for multiple members of the crew, with Cillian Murphy becoming an atheist due to his involvement with the film and his preparatory studies.
Wait, like he lost religion?
Well, he said that he was an agnostic prior and that he just was like, this movie, it's solidified. I'm out of here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, see, this is... See, I was never in a high school play about the death of the entire universe. That's the trick. I was in... I was in comedies from the mid-20th century where you never have any of these feelings. Okay, I see. That's incredible.
See, this is why my high school was really great, because we did the Drowsy Chaperone and then went right into restarting the sun to save the earth.
But it's like that Simpsons Planet of the Apes musical. Like everyone's singing all the time. Get out of my face, Mace. I'm restarting the sun. Like just dancing and stuff.
Dun, 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 dun. And the movie finally released in the UK on April 6th and saw a much more limited release in the US on July 20th, opening in just 10 theaters across LA, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and Boston, and ultimately making only $32 million on a $40 million budget. But the reception was mostly positive from critics and has even been declared the best horror movie ever made right here on this show. So there you go, folks. The ultimate critical buzz.
Yeah. Wow. So it, like, even, cause I've heard, you know more about this than me, but I've heard of the thing where people will say, like, oh, it earned more in ticket sales than its budget, but it still lost money from marketing and stuff. But this one just lost money. Like, They made less money than it cost.
Yeah, the whole way through.
Man.
It has done pretty well on home media, according to its sales there. It's possible that it's over time made its money back. It was only the other $8 million, but it has also gotten a lot more people coming back to it and being like, no, this is actually really great, especially as Alex Garland has become more famous himself, moving from writing into directing as well. So people have definitely revisited this and, come back to it to say, oh, I actually do like this a lot.
It extra feels like a movie that, like I watched it at home, and we have a television now, so I had a reasonably big screen to watch it on. But it's kind of a submarine movie. Like when you said that was part of the prep was submarine stuff and submarine crew behavior. Like as much as there are these huge shots of the one ship and the other ship and some really spectacular special effects, a lot of the rest of it is running around corridors trying to not die. And
yeah,
you can just fire this up at home. Like didn't Alex Garland end up with that with Annihilation? Like everybody watched it at home in the US, and it works fine.
Yeah, exactly.
This one I think even more than Annihilation probably.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that he does a really great job of making movies that feel like they have a large scale, but still keeping the focus pretty tight, so that you don't lose track of what your entire storyline is.
Yeah, especially I guess those are both Doom movies especially. But then like, man, now I'm just trying to remember all his stuff. Did he do Ex Machina? That's just another very straightforward premise that makes sense. And the world is not exploding.
Love that
There's
one.
Fun robots.
Yeah, but who knows what she's going to do once she makes it out of there.
That's true. Probably
take over is my bet.
Yeah, or probably do a musical, right? That's what everybody's doing these days.
We can only hope. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back to the show. Whoa, an ad. Don't freak out. Just wanted to let everybody know about the cool posters we now have for the best little horror house in Philly, a horror house party, and everyone was invited. Friend of the pod and incredible artist A.T. Pratt, who you may remember from the Eraserhead or You Are a Shark episodes, put together an amazing poster with at least one reference to every movie we've covered as the best on this podcast. You can check them out at littlehorrorphl.com/shop, but also patrons can get a 15% off coupon, which is basically the cost of the month of Patreon. So, that's an option too. I think the posters are rad as hell. Check them out, see how many you can name, and now back to the show. So to get into the actual movie, I really love this cool transition from the Fox Searchlight production card as the lights fade and the sun becomes a distant glow instead. It's a really cool way to utilize what could have just been very boring. and it instead fades right into the movie. We're informed of the current situation, which is specifically that the Icarus mission was sent to restart the sun, which has been dying, leaving Earth in a perma-winter. Unfortunately, it was a failure before it even reached the sun, and the Icarus 2 has just left to explode a solar. It might not even have been solar. It was basically boils down to a nuke in the sun and get it firing again, which would be humanity's last choice. And I love this choice of the name Icarus for the ship. Very deliberate choice to keep things kind of nihilistic and this hubris of man coming too close to the sun, which is sort of what Pinbaker is also talking about in terms of like, we're meant to return to dust and everything. Just a lot of cool stuff happening right up top.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the science in this movie, it is very, very easy to understand in a way that it should not be in a whole space mission to restart the sun thing. Like it's pretty straightforward. And yeah, even that mythological name, it's just like, oh right, sun stuff. I even recognize that. I'm following.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very approachable for being the movie it is.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think that one thing that does help to keep it kind of approachable, besides just keeping the science stuff relatively approachable, is they keep using this like imagery of eyes. And I think that someone coming to the movie and maybe not being a huge sci-fi fan, but being able to see that they are doing something and be like, oh, this is a filmic element that is not so reliant on my intelligence, but is more just like something that I can appreciate as a beautiful moment. And the amount of like the ship creating the shape of the pupil, turning the sun into a ever watchful eye at the very beginning, but so many times throughout the entire movie, there's a lot of eye imagery that I really love.
Right. Even, yeah, when people are throwing on aviators in the observation room to look at the sun, like that's wacky. And it makes total sense to me. And I would kind of see myself doing it at some point if I was in this weird situation, Like it just adds up in a way that's very smooth to me.
Now, the crew of the Icarus II is discussing their next move, specifically that they're entering the communications dead zone earlier than expected, so they'll be completely on their own within 24 hours. And as such, the crew is on edge, with a fight breaking out between Mace and Kappa, Chris Evans and Cillian Murphy. And through these first handful of minutes, I also really like the ship's design as we've gone past the oxygen garden, the observation deck, which you've mentioned, the Earth room for relaxation, all these classic sci-fi stuff that I'm like, yes, show us these cool things in the ship that we don't get to have. But I like that it is not the focus of the movie. It's something that we pass through multiple times and we get to know the ship, but it never feels, again, like that fetishization.
Yeah, that's right. I even like how the ship is mostly a bomb. Like it's just this humongous solar shield and bomb, and then there's a little. It's like if they took one of the Connects pieces out of the International Space Station. That's the entire rest of the ship. It's just like a stick plugged into the back of it. Yeah,
and they pass Mercury, leaving just the finish line in sight. But as they do, they pick up a strange radio transmission, the Icarus One's distress beacon. Mm-hmm. Now, it's possible that someone or someones could have still survived during this time, but Mace speaks up to say that it's absurd to even consider going after them in lieu of completing the mission. Now, Psych Officer Searle agrees that there are a lot of potential drawbacks, but as the entire mission is theoretical, it may be worth the risk in order to grab a second payload in case the first doesn't work. Yeah. Now, this is such an interesting moment for me where they reveal that the entirety of the mission is hinging on a 45% chance of this projection being accurate. It's just so shocking, and I think it really does a great job of communicating how desperate this situation is. They're like, we have literally mined all fissile material from Earth. There is nothing else to do.
Right. It is. The Earth being like out of bombs is such a wonderful concept to me. I don't know. I like me and the wonderful Michael Swaim. We did a new podcast about Slaughterhouse-5, and there's an amazing sequence in that where one of the characters sees World War II in reverse. And so if you see it in reverse, like the bomb material gets placed back into the Earth where it can't hurt anybody, Wow. I was just really liking the other angle of that, of we took all the bomb material out and we shot it at the sun. Back here now, we just
ultimate
have
bomb.
like food and blankets and clothes and stuff. A couple buildings. That's it.
Yeah. The
It's very
Sydney Opera
pleasant.
House is still standing. That's all we know.
Yeah, one opera house, right? Yeah.
That night, the crew is roused by an alarm, though Kappa is already awake from a nightmare. And it turns out that when Trey was setting the new coordinates for the slingshot in order to get to this Icarus 1, which, by the way, Kappa did determine that it was worth it because they want to have the second option. And it turns out that when Trey was setting the new coordinates, he didn't account for the new angle of approach and didn't adjust the solar shields. And this is where, in addition to some of the fighting and everything, we can see just how much these people are feeling the weight of this. You know, Trey is like breaking down in this moment. He's crying. He's sitting there. He's saying, I fucked up. Like, I'm sorry. And everyone else is just kind of like standing there. Like, what do you even say to that?
Yeah. Right. Like one of them takes out a management book. Like, surely there's a tip in here, right?
Just go to the index.
Yeah.
Almost destroyed the entire spaceship.
Yeah, the index for sun, like S, sun. There's nothing there. Okay.
I see in my copy, there's actually a few things. We have to go sun, comma, starting, finishing, all kinds of different stuff.
Sunscreen doesn't help here,
Yeah.
but good idea. Should always do it. Wear sunscreen. Good. Yeah.
That's right.
That's the other. Space is terrible, and also the sun is terrible. I feel like this movie has a very strong and good stance on how bad the sun is. It's bad to be in a situation where you're depending on the sun, which we are all in all the time. It's not great.
Yeah.
It's a very fickle and burny thing, and I don't like it.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
I don't care for it either myself.
Yeah. That joke where Mr. Burns says, like, man has always wanted to kill the sun. Yeah. He's
It's
right.
true.
Kill it.
That's why we launched all the fissile material at it.
Yeah, blow it up. Yeah.
Now, Captain Kaneda volunteers to go out and check the damage as the sensors have been completely burnt out. But it's a two-person job, so Mace volunteers Kappa as punishment for his decision. This freaking guy. I have to say, I really do love Chris Evans's performance in this movie. I think that when he gets to do like weird sci-fi stuff like Snowpiercer and this, that he really does thrive in it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's very good in this, and good in, like, I feel like he often has a upbeat Boy Scouty thing going on, even when everyone's sad on the Death spaceship. But I think he plays against it well with this. It's a very nice, like. And everyone's sad in the Snowpiercer train too, but there it's like, obviously he's the hero though, and here it's like, obviously he's still going to be the guy to like kind of come through in the end, even though he's mad at all his colleagues and this stinks, you know?
Yeah. In they go to their spacesuits. Very cool design again. Bright gold leaf for shielding, and actually called the Kenny suit because it was inspired by the shape of Kenny's hoodie in South Park, which adds to the confinement feeling when they have just a strip for their eyes instead of the huge opening.
It's the best ominous name. Yeah. A famously killed character in every episode.
All right, everyone into your Kenny suits.
I'm sick of working. I'm putting on my Cartman suit. I'm going to have some snacks. I'm going to be nice to nobody. I'm taking a break. I'm going to the Cartman suit.
There are 4 damaged panels, it turns out, and they get to repairing, but as the shields move, in order to let them get at it and block them from the sun, it reflects the light, and the sun tears through the oxygen garden and starts a fire, which causes the ship to revert to its original rotation and puts the men outside at extreme risk, while they're now also having to worry about their supplies and damage inside as well. Classic sci-fi to have these sort of avalanching problems start to snowpile, and it's great. It's great.
Yeah, it's all Apollo 13 in a lot of ways that I think are very effective, and also not derivative of that movie or anything. And that's a real thing that happened. But there's just constantly a progression of problems that they're dealing with in a way that moves it forward. It's great.
It's so funny to me, even at like the very end when Cillian Murphy's character like trips and he's just like, oh God, I lost so much blood. I have to pick myself up now too.
Right. First my blood goes. Then
Yeah, just all these things that stack up. And Corazon is devastated at the loss of her beloved garden, and Captain Kaneda sends Kappa back inside while he finishes the repair job. and the shield finally snaps back into normal position, and Kaneda burns up. A tragic sacrifice, and does call back to his being intrigued by Cyril's staring into the sun at the beginning of the movie, especially when Cyril's is begging Kaneda to explain what he sees out there.
Yeah, that undercurrent, my memory of this movie was that all of the madness and the horror kind of comes out of nowhere, but watching it again, there is more setup of everyone losing their minds, and in particular Cliff Curtis's character just being obsessed with, like, what happens if I keep looking at the sun, like, a lot, man? Like, I'm right here. There's no atmosphere in the way. I just... And so, like, as your captain is burning up to be like, but, like, tell me if God's there, is, like, really interesting as a whole thing, and sets up Pinbacker great.
Definitely does. Also, Cliff Curtis, really fantastic in this movie as well.
Yeah, really cool.
Now, Trey is horrified at this entire situation and feels like it's his fault. And in fact, it is his fault, but that's not a nice thing to say. So they all just kind of are like, oh, okay, Trey.
Yeah.
And Searle declares him a suicide risk and sedates him. Mm-hmm. But despite this, it's all in motion already. The ripples continue to accumulate, and now that the garden is destroyed, they don't have the oxygen to reach the payload release point. And Comms Officer Harvey, now acting command, continues their path towards Icarus 1. Now, huge shift from Kaneda to Harvey in terms of leadership style. Harvey did not read that book that I have with the management tips for the Sun, and he is a real kind of a jerk, very self-interested throughout the whole thing, and it is kind of, again, seeing the way that this accumulates, but even just the way that the dynamics change when someone else is put in charge. It's just, there's so many little things building up to make this pressure build and build and build.
I've seen this movie a couple times now, and when Harvey is now in charge of the ship, I still thought Chris Evans was second in command somehow. I think it's just because he's Chris Evans, but like, yeah. It took me some beats to figure out that guy Harvey was second in command, because he really doesn't feel like it in a way that is effective. Like, they did a good job of making the movie, and that's why.
Yeah. Oh man, I love when Chris Evans is like, "You're the comms officer on a ship with no communications." Yeah. Now, Harvey, Kappa, Searle, and Mace go to search the Icarus 1, while Cassie and Corazon stay on board the Icarus 2 with Trey. They split up to cover more ground while exploring. Very funny joke about Alien here, where they're like, oh, if we split up, we're going to get picked off one by one by an alien.
Yeah, they've seen movies in the movie. It's good. Yeah.
And they find a few things of note. Firstly and importantly, the ship is almost completely operational, especially the O2 garden, which has grown unchecked for 7 years. A huge relief, because this is something they had feared as a risk of heading for the Icarus 1 in the first place, was doing this to get to a wreck. They also check out the ship's log and find the final transmission was a wild, rambling message from the former captain, Pinbaker, and it reveals some shocking news. First of all, that he is completely burned up, and that he feels like this mission is spitting in the face of God, who has determined that it's our time to return to the dust. Very intense.
That's leadership, folks. That's how you get everybody. That's how you get buy-in. You know what I mean? You have a team, lots of competing priorities. Tell them God wants us all to return to dust, and then then you're going to hit Q4, you know?
And this way you can keep passing the buck and be like, no, this is God's decision. He wants us to return to the dust. I don't think we should, but I just got to do what he says. So it's Jacob and Isaac all over again.
Look, I think he should provide a ram at the last second, but I don't know. Look, I that's just me.
Yeah. Hey, I think you're right. Now, this transmission is revealed to have come right around the time that they were supposed to deliver the payload, which Kappa determines simultaneously is good to go. The real issue is that the one thing wrong with the ship is the mainframe of the flight computer, which is important as well for two reasons. First, it shows signs of sabotage, and second even, it means delivering the payload of the Icarus 1 is impossible. This is not good news for them, and they find the crew of the Icarus 1 finally as well, in the observation room, burned to death from the unfiltered exposure to the sun. when suddenly the two ships explosively decouple, both literally and figuratively. This huge burst kind of throws everyone off, and there's a huge breach in the hull, and now they're not connected anymore. So we have our two groups on completely different ships.
Yeah, and the burned up crew of the first ship is like low key maybe the spookiest, scariest part of the movie. Like they look like Pompeii Roman victims, you know? It was really, I forgot how astonishing it is how they did that.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating to me because the way that they're positioned in there, it almost kind of looks like maybe they went a little sun crazy too, because it doesn't look like it was like a struggle. It looks like they're all just sitting there on the bench together. Very, very eerie.
Yeah, it's like they sat down to hold hands. Like, it's really terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Kappa is getting put in the lone spacesuit so that he can get back by launching across the gap with the decompression, but Harvey freaks out in the face of death and demands that he be the one to go back since he's the captain now. The rest of them convince him to chill a little bit by wrapping him in the protective casing of the airlock until they realize that one of them has to stay behind and operate the lock from the inside. And again, this paranoia and fear of the whole movie really comes to a point where he starts going like, oh, you think it's going to be me, right? This, again, terrible captain, bad leadership all around. No good, Harvey.
Read the book. Read the book.
I did read that the reason that this guy is such an asshole is because he was named after Harvey Weinstein. That's what Danny Boyle says.
Really?
So yeah, because he was he was really, I forget what movie Boyle produced. Oh, Train Spotting. He did Train Spotting for the Weinsteins, and then apparently Harvey was not so nice to him and played havoc with what he wanted to force him to edit it in different ways and everything creatively. So they said this was their little homage to old Harvey Weinstein here.
Man, what an Easter egg.
Yeah, right.
It's really tucked in there.
And it all comes around to him in the end because when he gets launched out, he bounces off something on the way over, flies off into the void of space, freezing and then shattering. Kappa and Mace get into the airlock relatively safely.
Yeah, they really lingered on him, that happening to him.
Satisfying scene, in my opinion, for him to go out there and get his comeuppance.
And now I'm wondering if it's because they were mad at that Hollywood monster in real life, too. So that adds up. Yeah.
Could be. Now, they say goodbye to Cyril, who kills himself like the rest of the crew by staring into the sun just as he had been so tempted all along. I think this is, again, very interesting sign of his, like, madness and the desperation of the mission and everything, but it's just a fun little moment. I did think it was interesting that he does not respond to the crew at all when they're all saying goodbye.
Yeah. I mean, everybody, if people have never heard of the overview effect, it's just a really interesting thing to read about, and it has been documented with especially like the first astronauts who, you know, are leaving an Earth that's going fine to go on an adventure and then come back. But just the impact of seeing the Earth from that angle and everything, it really impacts them psychologically. So, like, I feel like this movie takes some leaps with how the mission and the sun impact people, but also it's still like plausible enough that it works. Like they could all just totally lose their minds or humanity or whatever else in the process of everything we've just described.
Right. Any one of those things would have been plenty.
Yeah. Plus, most of them don't get to date Rose Byrne or Cillian Murphy, right?
So true.
They're left out.
Now, they determined that the uncoupling was manual, and Mace says they have to consider that Trey did it. Kappa doesn't believe it because of how he blamed himself plus the drugged up state that he's been in. But Corazon says now that they're down 2 breathers, if they get rid of Trey, they'll still have the oxygen to complete the mission. Now, talk about cutthroat here. You know, this mission at all costs, it's really hard to be like, she's right in a way. Like, this is truly all of humanity against one guy. And it is very fucked up for them to not, like, give him a chance to have a say in whether he's gonna sacrifice himself, but they do think that he's the one who did this, and it's a very bleak moment where they're all like, we just gotta kill this guy so we have enough oxygen.
Yeah, and that hierarchy too of like Cillian Murphy's character knows how to run the bomb. So he gets to live as we make all these decisions, no matter what. Like they pretty simply and economically lay out like who gets chosen to live or die depending on which role they play on the ship, which is dark too.
Yeah. And Mace says that he'll be the one to do it, but Cassie refuses to acquiesce on what was decided to require unanimous consent. And then they're all just like, actually, there's nothing else we can do. So sorry, Cassie.
Yeah.
Really messed up. And Mace goes to do the deed. And I love this shot where he pulls out the drawer and 2 of the scalpels are missing already. And you're immediately like, oh no, something is awry.
Oh, I didn't notice that. That's amazing. What a hint.
Yeah, they're great. And it's even more funny because so I couldn't remember if Pinbaker like had a weapon or not. And so when they show Trey on the ground here because he has in fact actually already killed himself with one of these scalpels. And I was looking around. I was like, does he have 2? Is Pinbaker already like on board and messing stuff up with the other scalpel? And then when you see him have the second scalpel later, it all clicks back in and you're like, oh man, great movie. Now, Kappa and Mace start fighting when Mace blames Kappa for all the deaths, thanks to his decision to divert the mission. But all they can do is continue and try and conserve oxygen by not fighting anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, the budgeting there is just... And again, this is a business podcast. Folks, a lot of times your employees are going to request oxygen. It's a very common... what should we call it, George? A complaint? A complaint of employees. They're like, I want to breathe, blah, blah, blah. And... you just can't let all of them have it. And I think this movie takes a very firm stance on that.
That's right. Everyone, you take a few breaths here, and you have to hold off.
Right.
Because we have a limited, there's a scarcity of oxygen, and, the people up top, they got to have all their oxygen. So
yeah. The Amortan Joe and his tower of oxygen gets to have the most, because he built the tower, and that's the way it goes.
That's the way it goes. Oh, boy. Now, the real problem is that the oxygen is running even lower than it should be, and they don't know why. And the Icarus still insists that there are 5 crew members on board with an unknown visitor currently in the observation room. Very scary.
So spooky.
We're all out here like, who could it even be? They're in the vacuum of space. Now, when they go to check it out, the sun is bright as hell, and inside the room, a voice asks if Kappa is an angel, before monologuing about how at the end of time, there will be one man left alone with God. And when Kappa grabs the man, it reveals him to be completely burned in a way that was actually inspired by Niki Lauda's F1 injuries. And he realizes that this must be Pinbacker. And Pinbacker uses the second missing scalpel to slash Kappa in the guts.
Wow. Yeah, they were really thoughtful about all those little details and items and things. Like, I also feel like the spaceship has aged pretty well because it's been some years now, and like the technology of it and the design of it looks like pretty fresh for this being a movie from 2007. So like, and even down to the burns on the guy and stuff, they really like took their time. It's really cool.
Yeah, I really agree, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. We kind of touched on this a little earlier, but the usage of the camera with Pinbaker and sort of the break from reality that happens in this movie where it can't focus on him and there's like these pulls on him and shaking and everything.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really interesting, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on if you think that this is a benefit to the horror elements of it or a hindrance to it in terms of maybe making it a little harder to focus on versus creating that uncertainty.
That's a cool question. I think it's a benefit, and I also think it's a big ask of the audience. It's sort of the other movie I was thinking of is Interstellar, which I love. I think it's a great movie, but that's almost the love story version of this kind of movie, and it just starts taking big leaps in the later half of it, and I think you get a really rich experience if you decide to go with it. But they are just asking the audience to do that with no like enticement, like I could easily see somebody being like, no, that's stupid, I'm done. And it's like, I mean, fair, sure.
Yeah, and it's funny that it is like such a shift, an hour and change into the movie. Like, this is not early days. It's a very interesting shift for how late it happens as well.
Yeah. He's like he's like a rage virus monster who also has a weirdly more grounded cosmology and belief about how the universe works. And then also the camera can't even focus on him, and his body parts are coming off in a way where you think he would just die. And there's a lot of leaps happening in a cool way.
Yeah, that's also part of the kind of break from reality moment where Pinbaker doesn't seem to be as affected by the elements as some of these other people were. You know, Kappa runs out the room, turns the sun up to full, and Pinbaker is still right on his heels. You know, the sun doesn't seem to do anything to him because of these 7 years I spent talking to God.
Right. It's like how a lot of James Bond villains will have one henchman who's just really big. And then that guy, just anything can happen to him until he's like fully thrown into a jet engine or something. But this movie like even skips that. It's just like if Jaws or Stamper or whoever like climbed out of the jet engine and was like, I am still coming, you know? Like so if the audience fails at that point, I don't blame them. But I think sticking with it works.
I totally agree. Kappa does make it to a safe location, but is still bleeding. And Pinbacker leaves Kappa there to go sabotage the mainframe again. In the remnants of the O2 garden, Corazon finds a baby plant and is psyched as hell, only to get stabbed from behind by Pinbacker. Another really tragic moment where it's like, oh, maybe things could restart if they like gathered up and revitalized the oxygen garden and really took their time. But even that little last gasp of hope, the thought that not everything had been destroyed like they feared, even if it's more of a symbolic victory than a real one. Right at the end, she gets stabbed in the back. It's really brutal.
Yeah, and that living plant is almost an interstellar jump where something, it's basically magical that's still alive. As far as I can tell, I'm not a spaceship garden grower, but that seems to me to be totally impossible.
Get a load of this guy, not a spaceship garden grower.
I know. I'm all thumbs and not green ones, folks. Not green ones. It's tough.
So the rest of the crew is finally starting to notice things are wrong, although at this point that's just Cassie and Mace. She runs into Pinbacker and has to hide while Kappa is able to warn Mace. Mace dives into the coolant to try and save the mission, which also lets Cassie take advantage of Pinbacker's surprise as the lights start to come back on and attacks him. Now, Mace warns Kappa that he has to detach the payload manually, and he dives back in one last time to fix things. But as he leaves, his legs get caught, and he freezes to death, but not before begging Kappa to finish it. And this is, speaking of these Bond villains that take a lot to finally croak, this dude is diving in and out of this freezing cold coolant, in and out, and then finally, it's not until he gets trapped there that he finally perishes. It's a very heroic thing for him to do and really kind of bring the character back around as a hero instead of, because he has been the grump the whole time, but you see that it is all in the spirit of the mission, at least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everybody, it's a very interesting dramatic situation where everybody's on board with the mission and they're mad at each other. So so they have fights about stuff and then stick together and it all feels earned. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Kappa blows the airlock out towards the sun. And one final challenge as he trips, like I said, and he's struggling to get back up, but he pushes through, detaching their section of the ship so that they all hurtle towards the sun with the payload. Pinbacker attacks, but Kappa rips the skin off his arm. Also very gross.
Yeah, I was glad for the lack of focus in that moment, too. Just for my own comfort.
Yeah, that'll do it. This obviously gives him enough time to get to the bomb and arm it. Not Pinbacker's arm, but arm the bomb. Now, they all explode, but since time and space are so fluid here, which they did talk about, that part of the reason that the bomb might not work is because of the no one knows what happens when you pass through the sun. It's all a weird mishmash of density and all kinds of crazy stuff happening. So they go in there. Kappa uses his last few moments to accept the oncoming light, becoming enveloped by it as he reaches out and touches the surface of the sun. Wow.
Yeah, that's interesting because that felt like another leap and go with it and it's cool thing. And maybe there is some science to like time dilating or something, and that's actually medium to small realistic. I don't know. I like that added thing, and am good with it just being, this is the part in Interstellar where there are a bunch of rooms and strings between them and it's fine, like cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this also does a great job of bringing things kind of full circle, in that it's the very beginning moments of the movie that the psych officer is talking about how the difference between darkness and light is that you are separate from the darkness, but you become one with the light. And this is very much seems to be what Kappa is doing here.
Yeah, how about that?
How about that?
And just achieving any emotional moment at all in a scene where a guy falls into the sun. But they did. Like he has his dream nightmares where he falls into it, and then a more positive experience of the real thing. And you're like, cool. I'm glad him and the sun kind of worked it out. Like
so true, so true. They earned it. Those crazy kids.
Yeah. No one thought the two of them could be partners as cops on the streets, but look at them. Look at them riding in the car together now.
One's a physicist. One's a giant ball of plasma.
I'm the good cop, and he's the bad cop in the sense that he incinerates you immediately. We will not get any information out of you, actually.
Wow. Police brutality is out of control.
Yeah.
Back on Earth, Kappa's sister listens to his message that he sent right at the beginning, while her kids play in a snowscape by the Sydney Opera House, and suddenly the light of the sun becomes stronger. Mission accomplished. They did it. What a fun, hopeful ending for this movie. It's just a great little moment for everyone involved.
Yeah, I like that they weren't too cool for a happy ending.
Yeah.
Like they just went ahead and did it. Cool.
I love that. I also love that, we get the Earth room, which is meant to simulate relaxing situations on Earth. But this is the first time that we have seen Earth in the movie.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I love that. They're just completely focused on space, that this is not a habitable environment. It's so lost that they're just not even going to waste the time looking at it until we can have the hope of the sun coming back. I really like this ending a lot.
Never thought of it that way. Yeah, wow.
And now, Alex, we've reached the part of the show where we sum up why this is not just a good horror movie, but is the best horror movie ever made, whatever that means to you. And so, for someone who is the ultimate scare connoisseur, this might not be the best horror movie. But for you, why is this the best horror movie ever made?
Oh, for a second I thought you were saying I was the ultimate scare connoisseur. That's just a bit. No, I think it's a really special version of a lot of different things. I think it really benefits from Danny Boyle trying to make a lot of different kinds of movies all the time, because it ends up being different than the usual slasher. The slashing is sudden and also grounded and different than what you've seen. And watching it in 2021, it's really interesting to see a movie where like there's a primary problem of restarting the sun and also surviving space, to the point where the insane slasher man is just like, I will deal with it too, whatever. Like and I don't know. I'm feeling hopeful about the world, and also we've had some recent time where there's like multiple concurrent problems going on, and that felt interesting to see represented in a horror movie, because I feel like so many horror movies focus on one big bad problem, and this is like a grounded, creative, exciting way of doing a lot of bad things all at once, in just a really well and thoughtfully put together way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that this is the best horror movie ever made because it is such a fascinating combination of what I would still consider to be a horror movie with just a more science-based environmental horror. But
cool. Yeah.
For it to then merge with a slasher in a really interesting way so late in the game, and have the slasher really, as you say, function more as a secondary antagonist, just pushing the mission forward, than the actual big bad, is something that I don't think really gets done very often. And it's not just done in this, but done extremely well.
Yeah.
I think that the casting is incredible. I think that the performances are all great. I think that the way that it is writ and shot, also fantastic. Everyone in this movie is doing so much with what they are putting into it. And I think that it also really reminded me of Silent Runnings, which is another old sci-fi movie that has to do with environmentalism. And
cool.
In that one, it's much more about like Earth is fucked, and so all of the plant life got put in space so that we could bring it down to Earth when things got fixed. And then the problem is that this is an American Airlines spaceship, and so American Airlines decides, no, we're going to go back to capitalism, and so they start destroying all the plant life in there. And it's about the main character, Bruce Dern, trying to save his plant pals with the help of two robots. So people should check that out if they like this movie as well.
It sounds great. I'm in the short term, I'm wondering if it's literally owned by American Airlines in the movie, or if you're just doing a joke about American Airlines.
No, it is literally American Airlines.
Oh, okay. I was like, man, George had like a bad flight recently or something. Like,
look, that's neither here nor there. American.
I'm sorry you spent a night in Dallas. It's just sometimes they get stuck.
Yeah, so that's a very fun movie, and
Wow,
to me,
sounds cool.
This feels Sunshine feels like a very cool continuation of these sci-fi horror movies that really do an awesome job of not only exploring the vacuum of space, but our own human hubris and the way that we can be our own worst enemies. I think that is something that sci-fi horror does better than almost anything. And I just love it. And I think that this is the very best example. So Sunshine is the best horror movie ever made. And Alex is a wonderful podcast guy multiple times over, who now is plug time. So you can tell everyone all about those wonderful podcasts and anything else you got going on as well.
George, man, this is a treat. Thank you. And I would love it if people checked out my weekly podcast called Secretly Incredibly Fascinating. It's a show where every week we take one thing that people think is ordinary. Like there's going to be an upcoming one about spoons, just spoons. And we get into the history and the science and the stories and why those are amazing and why those are more exciting than you ever realized. And it's me doing a bunch of research and then comedian guests coming in and being funny with me as we talk about it. And so I hope people check it out. I think it's great.
I agree that it's great. I'm very much looking forward to the most recent episode, which features Jeff Rubin and friend of the show, Cody Ziegler. So there you go. Can't wait to check that one out.
Yeah, they're both awesome. And yeah, we talked about keyboards on that one, if people want to find it. Oh, and again, the name is Secretly Incredibly Fascinating. I find that people, if they just search Secretly, they usually find it in their player. So that's a tip for finding it. Search for Secretly.
There you go. Definitely check that out. As far as my plugs, you can find me on Twitter at Little Horror PHL. That's pretty much the name for everything, everywhere. But most importantly, it is the name for the Patreon, where you can find all kinds of bonus episodes, including we just released an episode about Doki Doki Literature Club, the visual novel that secretly becomes a psychological horror video game. We also did the me and two of my close friends who are big Simpsons fans. Also, there were plenty of Simpsons references in this very episode. We talk about our top 5 Treehouse of Horrors shorts from the first 10 seasons. So if you're interested in the Treehouse of Horrors, then people can go listen to that episode right now on the Patreon. So check that out for just a few bucks a month. And that's it for me. So check out Secretly Incredibly Fascinating. It's really great, guys. And thanks again, Alex.
Man, yeah, George, thank you. It's been great to be in your corner of Philly here, talking about... I've never gotten to talk about this movie this much. It's a treat.
Hell yeah. Well, thanks again, and bye, everyone.